Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And today we get to talk about a father's impact in the home or father's role in the home. And this is, we had previously talked about the mother's role. This one's a little bit easier because, weirdly enough, we're all fathers. So it might be, might not be as much of a stretch. But if I were to ask each of you what you feel your most important role is as a father, your most important impact, what would you say that it is?
I would say, I guess emphasis would be character development. 'Cause I think it lacks a lot in our culture. Um, so I make sure that's like I emphasize that a lot, and because it's not just about getting a job one day and going through all that. It's about actually becoming a good man, somebody and also like spiritual development as well. I think those two character, I think they go hand in hand. But
I would say two things, because again, I got all boys. So there is a sense I have to show them what it looks like to be a man. I have to, I'm very much aware that in the way I treat my wife is how they're going to treat their wives.
Mm.
And I'm very much that role model, whether I want to be, whether I think of myself as that I am. Uh, but there's also what I've noticed with my boys, and I've seen in several other families. So this is a trend. The dad is the one who brings that discipline. That my boys respond to me differently than they respond to my wife, and that I need to be that role. I think in our culture it becomes cliche. They're like, I'm going to tell your father, and but there is that element that they understand that there's this this discipline that comes from me that we talked about with mothers. Mothers tend to be more nurturing, and the kids need that. But I think that's some of the balance is, I am a little bit like, no, you need to, you okay, this happened the other day, kid fell down, he's bloodied. Like, get up, walk it off. Like, I really, it's superficial. So there's that
Right.
element. Like, nope, you're okay. Get up, walk it off. And he's like, it hurts. I was like, of course it does. You're bleeding. I was like, but you're okay. And to communicate that, but also to show them that when those things happen to me, yeah, okay, I'm bloodied a little bit. I'm gonna, I'm gonna deal with it. They watch that. They see that. Whether or not I want it, I play that role, and I'm very aware of that.
And it's not to say that the mothers aren't disciplining children or
Right.
shouldn't discipline the children. There's a role there too. But let's be overall the primary should be the father disciplining the child. Um, and at least managing it in kind of the overarching way,
Mhm.
right? If let's be honest, if the mom is in charge of discipline, the father is failing.
yeah,
If the mom is the one that is if the mom is the one that has to put that all together, then she's either a single mom or married to a weaker man. Is what it boils down to.
'cause
Yeah.
I think from some kind of just from my experience, if the father isn't involved, it's the mom. It's like it's almost an exacerbate. Like it just makes like the way they have to discipline. It makes it so much difficult. Like they're not in that place if it's not like their role like primarily, and they have to fill that role. It's gonna be like not the same type of discipline. She's gonna come out of a frustration, I think, as well.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Because
Well, and it's not, it's definitely not by God's design
yeah,
for someone to have to do it on their own,
yep,
right? And I'm a father of, a bunch of girls, and a boy, but I got a bunch of daughters, and I kind of feel a lot of that same uh, pressure by the way that I treat my wife is the
yeah,
way that they're going to expect to be treated,
yep.
Mhm.
and the way that I treat them. If they know that they are loved, they won't be looking for that elsewhere. And I think that goes for boys as well, except for they just look for, where boys and girls look for that love elsewhere. Varies drastically between the two.
Well, and to bring it back to a softer side, that the role of dad, it's funny with my boys. like if you ask them, like if we're gonna do something, it's like, what are we gonna do? Like all three of them, from the oldest to youngest, be like, wrestle the daddy time, and my wife gets she's a little irritated. She's like, why do boys do this? And I was like, but there's something about that I can relate with my boys. The boys tend to be more physical and like actually wrestling and engaging like that. That's important. And even it doesn't have to be long, but I'll do that with the boys, and they get so excited. And to love on my kids that way, that's the kind of thing. That's the small thing. I think dads focus many times. Well, I have the career, and I've got to pay the mortgage, and all those things are important. But I've also learned not to overlook things like wrestle the daddy
Yeah.
time.
Mm.
That is very important for them, but I also balance that because my wife can't stand wrestle the daddy time. So
We
she's like, I'm gonna go in here and like crochet or go in here and read a book, do something. You guys tell me when you're
Well,
done.
I actually, it's that's a major motivator for me to stay in somewhat shape, just to be able to do that. Because I could do it much better in my 30s. Now I'm in my early 40s. I'm like, I used to run around with them just as, but now I'm like, I want to be able to at least still have that time, like still have
Yeah.
those moments. My daughter, she's, I thought she would be the more calm one, but she's actually she wants that even more. Like
Yeah, when they're younger, yeah,
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 she
they
she
do.
wants me to like, that's just likes to be tossed around, and she likes to have fun like in that sort of way. And I'm just like, I want to be able to not just be like, I'm exhausted, I can't do this. I want to be able to give her that kind of, this is 'cause it's special. Those time you have, like, especially when they're young.
Yeah, my son liked to wrestle too until the day he snuck up on me in the woods and put a stick around my neck, and I didn't know it was him, and I darn near killed him. And that was the last time. He had a big look of surprise on his face that day. That, oh, he's been messing with me and taking it easy on me this whole time. So yeah,
But
and
I think those things are important because our boys do, as they're growing, they don't understand those boundaries.
right, they gotta
And
learn them
that's
sometimes.
and that's the thing I've kind of learned, that sometimes we have this story, like I relate with my boys, where when I was really young and I was younger than 5 because we were still in the first house we lived in, and my dad was on the floor. I have older brothers, and they were wrestling. They told me, they're like, get him. So I did what any kid would, and I kicked my dad in the face. And like I really hurt him, and I was just like, and they're like, "Why did you do that?" I was like, "You told me to get him. Like I got him. That was like the easiest thing." I don't know what went through my brain. Not a lot, apparently. But I had this moment where and I felt really bad about it. But I watched this. I've watched this happen with my boys, that they'll do those, and I've been mindful of
Yeah.
that because again, they've inherited my sin problem. So when I watch this, I need those times to instruct them and to
Hmm.
help them understand boundaries. But even little things where my oldest was he had just come home, and my two youngers were telling him something they had done, and he basically said, well, that's no big deal. I did, whatever. And they were so excited to tell him. And I took that moment. I mean, I remember I was still in my bathrobe. It was early morning. I was like, no, right now we're dealing with this. This is a problem. This is an ongoing. You do not have to belittle what they're saying. And I mean, he hadn't even had a cereal yet. And I think that's the kind of role that I encourage dads, look for those moments,
So here's
those
where we get
teachable
into what
moments.
I feel is the most important role, and we're going to read Proverbs 4:1. Hear, O sons, a father's instructions, and be attentive that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your hard heart hold fast to my words. Keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many.
Hmm.
I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instructions, do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. And so, Thomas, I'm going to ask you, who is the she, the the valued she in this proverb?
The Lady Wisdom.
Lady Wisdom.
Hmm.
So
So
that kind of rolls into right what you were saying about look for those moments of instruction.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always loved that with Proverbs. He personifies wisdom as a lady. So I know we've already talked about women in the home, and there's a high view. Like, we have this lady wisdom because there's that sense that she's actually gentle, and it's the father who needs to be the one, like, who guides and who, like, listen to me, look at my eyes when I'm talking to you. And you get that sense in the early Proverbs when he's instructing his son. And I think that's also that this is not just it's not just a literary trope or figure. There's that sense this is the role dads are supposed to play, and I think
Right.
this is why I maintain Solomon wrote Book of Proverbs, and I think this is his instruction. This is what he tried to do. Whether or not he did a good job of it, he does teach it to us in that sense that this is the way we should be thinking with our kids and having these kinds of conversations.
Mhm.
I think that what ends up happening is we don't engage, and then all of a sudden we look at our kids one day and we're like, okay, I need to deal with you, but we haven't established that rapport. We haven't established that we're worthy to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
My kids know that I will abandon everything I am doing to have serious conversations with them.
Hmm.
Now they've played it against me for a fact, but they know that I am willing and love to sit down and just have those deep intellectual, deep important spiritual, emotional, like whatever conversations. So much so I was driving all night once recently, and I got in the car and I was super tired. And my daughter just like, so Dad, what do you think about predestination? And I don't have to go into what my thoughts are on it, but
Hmm.
she knew that just by asking that question, that for the next 4 to 5 hours, we would be talking deeply about predestination and all things that are associated.
Hmm.
And so, it makes me feel good when I read this because my kids know that I will literally abandon everything. There is nothing
Mhm.
that becomes more important than trying to impart that wisdom
Mm-hmm.
into their lives. And so I agree, discipline's super important because without it, they're never going to even be able to sit and listen to this. But I think the idea of us imparting wisdom into our children is probably one of the most important gifts that we can give them.
Well, and I think that the object of discipline itself is just to get their attention, because like even whatever that discipline is, like if it gets their attention where they now are not distracted, or not doing other things, they're looking you in the eye. That's I think you've disciplined. I think that the act of discipline, you stop them where they're at, and you give them what they need to draw their attention, and then you impart that wisdom when they're listening 100%. I think, and I like that absolutely.
I think the hard part with this is when you're trying to engage your kids, you we can sometimes suffer from having the plank in our own eye as we're trying to remove the speck from our
Mhm.
child's eye.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why when I encourage dads, like, you have to cl- be the kind of person that you want to see your child be,
Right.
because
Agreed.
they're
Yeah.
going to mimic you. They're going to pick up those things even if you don't intend to, and even when you don't have any ill intentions. Like, I used to joke with my wife, and I would say, I'd quote Jesus. She would say something, I would say, woman, because when he
Yeah.
Mary,
Mom.
in the
Yeah.
scripture, she says, hey, Jesus, they don't have wine. It's like, woman, what does this have to do with me? And it wasn't insulting at all.
No, no, no,
Like,
no, no.
not at all. But I would use that, and my wife understood. But my kids one day,
When
like,
that
they were
comes
in
out of an 8-year-old's mouth.
Yeah, like-
or
like one-
however,
one day we were in the car, and he goes, woman? And then I was like, yep, I did that. That was me. And my wife just kind of looks at me, and I was like, okay, guys, this is, you don't catch the subtle humor. So I will not do this again. Again, my wife never had a problem until that moment, and I was like, but again, it made me very aware. They're
Mhm.
watching, they're hearing, they're listening, they will repeat. And it's not because that they're trying just to be repeaters. That's how they learn how to be.
Yeah, the
That's
types of human beings that they
yeah.
will actually turn into.
They're going to parrot what they see. This is why within our ministry we're so big on the concept of family and having family time together, because if they spend the vast majority of their day around other kids, they're going to become like those other kids.
Especially if those other and those other kids are from, what kind of families are those other kids
Right.
from?
I mean, ideally, if your kid is around a whole bunch of well-adjusted, high-functioning children, then they have really good friends and they
Right.
will adopt those qualities. But the reality is that's not the majority. And in our family, we want to be the primary influencers, and we should, because that's what God has called us to be. He's called us to raise godly children.
Yeah, so there's two things I want to bring points to that. And I'm doing basically a family class right now in the church, and it'll be a long running one, but we're doing children right now. And so the first part of that I kind of want to key in on is what I tell them is, what are you doing as a parent? Like, what is even the point? So what do you want to turn them into? And we walk through an exercise of looking at what a godly adult looks like, and that is what we should be raising our children to be, that well-rounded godly adult, and everything we do between now and then should be to turn them into that avatar in which we want to turn our children into, right? And then the second thing, and this is just the way I talk, is if you are parenting through the do as I say, not as I do mentality, you've already failed. If you think that, there are certain words that are okay for you to say, but as soon as they come out of your kid's mouth, you're grounding them or washing their mouth out with soap, you're the failure, not your children. Because the only thing you have taught your children is that, they don't have to be consistently a good person. They can be, one person behind closed doors and the other person in front of their parents' faces. So if you're parenting out of that do as I say, not as I do, you're the problem.
It's that plank in the eye is exactly why that's a problem.
Right.
Now, that there are things that we do get to do as adults that kids can't do. There are aspects.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
but
Absolutely.
that's where prudence comes into. You just can't make it a formula. You just can't make it the blank statement. And I think that's the encouragement I give to all parents, and particularly with the dads. There is that model that is needed. The kids look to that.
Right.
And we were talking about the statistics that go into that. I think you
Yeah.
have it.
So, well, I don't have the statistics exactly, but it's the idea. Well, actually, it's funny because South Africa and the United States are two of the top countries with children in fatherless homes, and it is one of the leading indicators of success from a child to adult. It's one of the leading indicators on whether or not they're going to end up in prison.
Having two parents or single
Whether or not they're in a fatherless,
Mhm.
it's not two parents and single parents.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a drastic difference between a fatherless home and a motherless home.
hmm
While there's many less motherless homes, children that come from motherless homes fare far better than children that come from fatherless homes, but not as good as children from a two-parent household.
Right.
And so the idea of the father not being in the home has crushed societies. And if they don't have a father there to make that impact on a regular basis, they're more likely to join gangs. They're more likely to do drugs. They're more likely to fail out of school. They're more likely to end up in jail. They're more likely for early teen pregnancy or a contributor to early teen pregnancy.
Mhm.
They're more likely to just about every negative statistic you can possibly imagine, an indicator of a child coming from a fatherless home. That is the importance of a father in both young men and young women's lives.
hmm And that's where I think why this whole discussion on it's not about precision and being the right kind of dad. It's just being the dad that God has called you to be. Be that father. Be the Christ-like in the home. And you don't have to be like I'm one of those. You guys know me. I'm not a mechanic, So
Right.
when
Well, I don't mean that like that, but it's not about that kind of
I know
stuff,
you're
right?
quick, but there's
quick to answer.
yes,
Sorry.
there's others like when it comes to the
You're not a
mechanic.
mechanic, really? I didn't realize that, Thomas. I'm so sorry. I'm sure we should ask Justin to fix your car for you in the parking lot almost every other week.
that is not true. But anyway, so and I don't mind. Look, I own it. I don't know how to handle the
I'm
car.
just
I
joking.
don't know the carpentry. Well, that it because
And you come to me for that, and I come to you for Aristotle and Plato.
okay,
We
but
both, I know, we bring our strengths to the table.
there is that element. I don't know the traditional masculine things. Those were not my areas. So I've never felt, and I don't, even right now, I don't feel a sense of shame. I'm not trying
shouldn't.
to explain it away.
You should not.
But I think some dads do. They feel like, oh, I have to conform. I have to be like this. And I understand my strengths. I understand who and what I am. And I also understand what God has called me to be. So that's what I focus with my kids. And I'm honest with them. Like if my sons wanted to take a class on auto repair, I would be like, let's do it together because I could stand to learn
Sure.
some things. No one ever showed me. And I can't pass that on. But the things I have learned, I can pass those on. And
Right.
the things I haven't, the things I do enjoy, the things I am good at, those things I share with my children. And they like some of them not so much. And even as my boys, they're all musical. I have no musical ability, but I also don't discourage that. I don't push that away. I encourage them in that, and I want them to thrive in it, even though I've tried. That's one thing I say. God has not gifted me in that arena. I can't even sing, uh, but I can. I do appreciate. I do enjoy, and I can be that force, be that encouragement for them. And I think this is what just kind of dads sometimes need to hear, that you don't have to fit the cookie cutter mold. The only mold you got to worry about is the Christ-like mold.
And one of those, and I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree. But be the man, be the father that God has called you to be. But one of the things that is always going to be is present.
Mm.
And I think that's what you need to key in on is like, yeah, you can be all of the things that sometimes maybe we miss, right? I would like to be more well read with Aristotle and Plato, all the things. That's the things I come to you about, right? And yet so I can work with my hands. That's cool. I can teach my children that. But I lean on you for some of the other things, and I think that's good that we can go back and forth. But what's important about all three of us is that we are three very different people. The fact, right? Like we are three very different people, but we're all present for our children.
Mhm.
And do we all have improvement as fathers that we can get better at? Of course, but we're all present for our children. And I think that's what is one of the main indicators. And each one of us is trying to impart our wisdom into our children. It's just that each one of our strengths of wisdom might be a little different than the others.
Mhm.
And we're going to create very different looking kids unless we band together and build off of the community of each other.
I think that's the big takeaway, because we sort of had that when we talked about like for Mother's Day, but for dads, that idea just to be present, that's what we're missing with Fatherless Homes. I mean, obviously dad's not present, but even many times when the dad is there, sometimes he's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Many
that
times.
is my encouragement to men, that even when the kids, like I said, when they're doing the things that you're not interested in but they love, it means so much to them for you to participate somehow, to really be there, not be on the phone, not be sort of watching the TV while things are going on, but to really be there. It means the world. My dad, very few things did he ever do with me, and those few things he did, I cherish forever.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, thanks for the conversation as always. You can find us at familiesofvirtue.com. On our podcast, Virtuous Roots, can be found on all the streaming platforms. We'll talk to you next time. God bless.